What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Board Games Are for Everybody, where today we are going to be talking about For Sale by Century 21 Real Estate. This is a game from 1985. To my understanding, until someone tells me otherwise or I read something otherwise, because I wasn't able to find any information on it, there's a game that came out sometime in the 1990s also called For Sale, that I think is a re-implementation of this game of some sort. It could be something that this inspired. It could be something that this was re-implemented into, like I was saying. But I feel like because of the whole, real estate aspect of the game, even the name is For Sale. I feel like the 90s version is something that was either inspired by or is a re-implementation of this. And until someone tells me if that's true or not, that's what I'm going to go with. But we actually picked this up at a thrift store for relatively cheap. And I always hear people talking about the game For Sale from the 90s very highly. So I wanted to pick this up and check it out in the event that it was the same game or the same implementation of the game. Century 21 is an American real estate company. I don't know much about them. I'm not into that stuff. I just know that houses are too expensive as it is. So having a house back then, real estate has changed. That's for sure. So this is our game board here. Basically, the way the game works is that each player, if I can find the stuff here, chooses a token of whatever color that they want, and they start on their color property in Century Park in the middle here. So you start each game with a property already owned. So each player already has an executive property to their name. So when you go past the property management and stuff, you already have a property that you can collect rent on. So the way that the game works is that each player is given a predetermined amount of cards here. Now, in the instructions, these are split up into different amounts. And I don't think I saw anything otherwise in the instruction, but I can only guess that those amounts are for a 4-player game or even possibly a 3-player game. I feel like as a 2-player game, you aren't going to be running the board quite as much if you don't have more tokens on hand. So you could always just play the game where when you go to buy, just take a token from the supply. You don't have to worry about only having a certain amount. However, only having a certain amount does change up how the game kind of works, because you have to actually manage your properties a bit more. We're just going to slowly sort through things here. Don't think these ones were put back in order. Just going to get these over here. Those are all our townhouses. Those are all of our average houses. Here's all of our estate houses. Here's all our starter houses. Oh, did we miss one of the... Yeah, we did. Those are commercial and are sold. Okay. That's all set up. So basically, each player starts with a mortgage of $50,000 based on the house that they own here. We have all of our housing tokens. If I can get this page off here. This is what I get for having stuff from the 80s. Everything is sticking together. Each player has one of these market indicators. The market indicator starts on the average house being at $100,000. Throughout the game, this will slide either up or down, depending on certain events later on. This will dictate the price of houses as we go through the game. So each player would have one of these. We have our dice, and each player would also have an account book that allows them to keep track of their cash, keep track of their finances. Each player starts with $200,000, as you can see up in the top here. And that is everything you need to set up the game. So from this point, the players would just roll to see who goes first. Highest number goes first. So let's say green had that first roll of 8. Green would be the first player to go. So when you start your turn, you roll your dice and you start from the bank space. So I guess you just mortgaged that property in order to have the space, and you would move in correspondence to whichever whatever your total number of dice is. So you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, land on this blue space down here, or you can also come across the inner track here in order to kind of get through the board a little quicker, but it gives you a different route to go. So you would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So let's say that we decide to come on this inner path here. We now have the option to buy this plot of land, which currently has nothing on it, as indicated by the space, nothing being there. However, up in the top left corner here, there is an E, which corresponds to the executive housing. Now, if we wanted to buy that plot of land, we would have to take a look at our market indicator, which currently buying a plot of land costs $25,000. So if we wanted to buy that plot of land, we would need to spend $25,000 in order to get it. So we would go to our book here, if I can find where I put my pencil, and we would subtract $25,000 from our total, which would leave us at $175,000. Now that we have bought that plot of land, we take one of our sold icons and just place it on top here to show that we have purchased that plot of land. Now we don't have an actual house built there yet, but that will come a little later on. So that would end our turn. We would now go to the blue player, who's going to roll. They roll a 4, so they're just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So they're also going to start coming in through the inner path here because they don't want to land on taxes, which you would have to pay $1,000. And they are beside this townhouse here, and they would probably choose to buy that townhouse space again for $25,000 because that is what the current market price of plotted land is at. So they would buy that plot of land. They would take their sold token and they would place it right on top of that. So now that both players have finished a turn, what you have to do is you have to do 2 separate dice rolls. One dice roll will determine what the average housing price has currently gone to, whether it has increased due to inflation or shortages or a seller's market, or if they have decreased because of a buyer's market, a slump, or a recession. Just trying to get the token out here. Forgot to get it at the beginning. And we also have to do a second roll to determine what the mortgage rates are currently at. The mortgage rate always starts at 12% at the beginning of the game, indicated by this little token here. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll for our average housing price first. We roll a 9. We would take a look over here with the corresponding number. So there is currently a housing shortage, and that increases the average house price by $10,000. So what we would do is we would come over to our market indicator over here, and we would slide the average house price up to $110,000, which now increases the lot size, or the lot price, sorry, to buy new lots, but it also increases what all the houses are currently worth. That executive building that we currently own is now worth $170,000 based on the new increase to the average house price. Now we would also do a second roll to figure out what the mortgage rates are going to be. So if we get an even dice total, the mortgage rates go down. If we get an odd dice total, the mortgage rates go up. So we got an 8, which is an even number. So our mortgage rates are going to go down to 9%. Now that all of this information is changed, we get to continue on to the next round. And this is basically how the game goes until players get to either a predetermined amount or they get to a certain amount of turns that they choose to play up to. So you can either play to, say, $1 million, whoever has a combination in house value and amount of money in their account book to equal up to $1 million. That is what the rules recommend. Or they can say play for a certain amount of turns. So say you want to play 20 turns, and then whoever has the most money at the end of the game would win. So while we are currently up for lot prices, we are still relatively early in the game. So green would probably buy this lot here for $35,000, which would put us down to $140,000 left. And we would put one of our sold tokens on our executive here. So we now have 2 executive buildings, or land, I should say. We don't have the buildings yet as we have not built them. And then it would continue on to blue. Gets a 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now nothing happens because they are on land that we have already bought. Something I did forget to mention is that anytime you pass your own residence, you actually gain $5,000. So we would actually be at $145,000 here. Small detail I forgot, my fault. So once again, we have to see if we have increased or decreased average housing. So we have a slump. So we have decreased by $1,000. That's going to put us back at the average housing that we were just at. So if we had held off, we could have saved $10,000 on a plot of land, but it's good to buy up land while you can. We have a total of 9, which is an odd number. So we go back up to 12% for our mortgage rate, and we continue on with the game. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Since we just passed the property management space, we now get to collect rent on all of the houses that we own. Now, currently, we only own 1 executive house, and the rent for an executive house is $1,500. So we get to collect $1,500, which puts us at $146,500. And we are also now beside these 2 starter plots. So we could, say, spend $50,000 to buy both of those, which we might do. So that's going to put us down to $96,500. And we would put a sold token on both plots of land because you are allowed to buy the plot on both sides of the road. We would continue on to blue. Gets an 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They passed their house, so they would gain $5,000, putting them up to $180,000. And once again, we are at the end of the turn, so we would determine. So we got a 12. So we have inflation of the average house, which has increased average house prices by $20,000. So we have to, in accordance, move our sheets up to 120,000 for the inflated prices, which now changes what houses are worth, but also changes how expensive lots are. And we're going to roll for the mortgage, a 6, so we go down 9%. We're now going to roll again. We got a 2. We have landed on the City Hall property tax. Landing on City Hall requires a player to pay 1% of all of their housing cost. This is where you need to actually get a calculator out. We have one house currently, which is an executive, which currently costs $190,000, which that's a little easy at least. 1% of 190,000 is $1,900. So we would have to pay $1,900 in taxes, which would bring us down to $94,600. We come to blue, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So they also pass the property management space, which they get the $1,500 for the one building that they own. So the blue player is going to gain $1,500, putting them at $181,500, but they have also landed on tax. They need to pay the same amount that we do. Executive homes are currently at $190,000, 1% of which is $1,900. So that's going to put them down to 17,900. What did we say that was? 1,900. So 5 plus 4, 600. Now, once again, we have a 2. So we have a slump in the market, which decreases houses by 10,000, bringing us down to a new total. And we have a 9, which is odd. So our mortgage prices are going to increase. We have a 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Because we passed the bank, we either have to fully pay off our mortgage of $50,000, or we need to pay the mortgage of however much we owe at the current percentage rate. So we are currently at 12% mortgage rate, and we only have $50,000 that we have to pay. So we would have to pay $600 to the bank unless we chose to completely pay off this mortgage at $500. However, $600 currently is better than $50,000. So that's going to put us down to $94,000. And because we landed on one of these blue spaces, it gives us a good chance to talk about what the general contractor building zone does. Normally, in order to build a building on one of the lots that you've bought, you would have to land exactly on that property again in order to build whatever's there. However, if you land on any of these building spaces, you actually get to build on any of your properties, as many as you want, so long as you have the money to pay for it. So currently, building prices do not change throughout the game. Building prices are always the same. Currently, we have 2 executive buildings that could be built on our empty plots. However, to build an executive building, you have to pay $120,000, which we only have $94,000, so we don't have enough to do that. However, we do have these starter plots over here, and to build on a starter plot only costs $50,000. Now, we can only afford to build one of those, but it will give us some extra rent when it comes to collecting rent. So we now have $44,000 left. We would take our sold token back, and we would take one of our starter home tokens, and we would place it on that building. We have just built our first house. Feels good. Would go on to the blue player. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. they pass the bank. So like us, they have to pay a mortgage at 12% on the one mortgage value of $50,000 that they have. So they would also be paying $600 to the bank. So that puts them down to $179,000. And one more roll, a 3, puts us in a recession. So we get to decrease the housing total by 20,000. So we're going to be going down 1, 2, 3, 4, putting the average housing price down to 90,000. Now, if we were to go down 4 more spaces, we would end up with inflation happening because we bottom out on houses. That would cause us to have to go back up to the average house price. And on the other side of things, we would end up with a market crash if houses got too expensive and the average house price would decrease back to 130,000. But we are currently down at the 15,000 mark for plots. And that's more or less how the game works, is basically you want to build up all of your properties so that you can keep collecting more rent as you start going around and gaining more properties. You want to be the player who has the most property by either the end of the amount of turns that you play or up to $1 million or $2 million, whatever you want. I personally really like the idea of the game. The beginning of the game is really, really slow. However, getting out there and buying up plots and trying not to buy too many plots that you end up with no money can definitely be challenging. Like on our first run through here, we bought 4 plots of land and we only had enough to build on one of them by the time we came back up. However, that starter house would gain us an extra $700 in rent every time that we went around the board. So instead of $1,500, we would be gaining $2,200 in rent every time that we passed the property management. And every time you gain more money, you either go out and you start building more on land that you've bought up, or you buy more land to continue buying building permits to make more buildings to in turn get more money. It's a very repetitive game. Unfortunately, I feel like you could make some house rules to make it a little less repetitive, but you are pretty much just rolling, moving, buying, building every turn. There's not too much outside of that. However, there is some strategy in the game, buying the right amount of land, buying the best plots in order to get really good rent from buildings. Like if you have a bunch of commercial plots of land, you get 2,000 rent per thing. You're also managing when you buy lots. You want to try and buy lots low instead of buying them high. Like you wouldn't want to buy a lot at $60,000. You definitely want to try and get it when it's at 15,000 or somewhere lower. But that is more or less the way that that for sale works. I think it's pretty interesting. I think it's an interesting concept. It could have a little more to it though. I think it needs just a few tweaks. It really makes me want to look into for sale from the 90s, because that is a game that I hear a lot of good things about. Everyone always talks pretty highly of it, and I'm curious to see if it does have any relation to this for sale game. But that's all we have for sale. I think it's an interesting game. There is some strategy there. If you don't mind how repetitive it can get with just the rolling and moving, I think if you have more players in the game, it might be a little more manageable because you have more stuff kind of getting filled and you're trying to balance a little more, and you have longer between houses going up and fluctuating and stuff. But I can understand why some people might find the game to be a little slow. Because of that, I would still recommend it, honestly. If you can give it a shot, I would definitely recommend trying it out if you can find it. Or I would say check out the one from the 1990s if it does have any correlation. It is also a real estate game. People talk pretty highly of it, but that's all we've got for sale. It was a fun game. I enjoy it. I think other people who like this kind of theme would probably get into it as well. But until next time, guys, just remember that board games are for everybody. Hopefully I'll see you all then. Peace.